Symbols are not mystical. They are anything that carries more meaning than its surface suggests. A type of person who consistently triggers strong reactions, a seemingly harmless situation that repeatedly disorients you, or a decision you endlessly postpone without clear reason. These are not problems to solve immediately. They are data. Consider someone who feels irritated whenever there is a small change in family routines. Not major changes, just a later dinner or a postponed trip. On the surface, they may explain their reaction rationally. A dislike of disorder, a need for structure. But if observed over time, they may realize that the reaction lies not in the change itself, but in the rapid loss of orientation that follows. Jung would not ask, why aren't you more flexible? He would ask, what symbol is this change touching in your inner life? When the question is placed correctly, reaction separates from action, and thinking gains space. What matters here is not to interpret too quickly. Jung warned that rushing to assign meaning to the unconscious is often how the ego reasserts control. Jungian observation is not saying, this is because of X or Y, but allowing an image, reaction, or pattern to exist long enough for its structure to reveal itself. This requires a special kind of patience with ambiguity, and that patience is the foundation of a deeper stay calm. Not calm through control, but calm through not needing to rush. From a modern scientific perspective, this approach parallels research on metacognition, the ability to recognize one's own thinking processes. Observing reactions without immediately identifying with them activates higher order processing in the brain, where information is evaluated rather than reflexively acted upon. Studies on executive function show that the ability to step outside the thought reduces cognitive bias and improves decision quality. Jung, without neuroscientific language, intuited this early on. Thinking becomes intelligent only when it has distance from the content flowing through it. Another subtle aspect of Jung's observational method is attention to repetition. Not major events, but small details that recur. An argument that always follows the same script. A familiar feeling that appears whenever you occupy a certain role. A thought that returns precisely when you're about to make an important decision. Jung saw these as signs that a deeper structure is seeking entry into consciousness. You do not need to act on them immediately. Recognizing that they exist is already a meaningful shift. Jungian inner observation also means learning to view life as a series of messages rather than a list of problems to solve. When something triggers a strong reaction, instead of asking, how do I deal with this, you can ask, what in me has just been recorded? This question is not meant to produce quick answers, but to slow habitual reflex. And it is precisely this slowing that allows thinking to become more flexible, less driven by preset conclusions. Important, this method does not make you passive. On the contrary, it creates a subtle form of agency. You act not from vague impulse, but from an increasingly clear understanding of the structure. When you recognize that a reaction does not belong to the present, you gain the freedom not to act on it immediately. When you see a symbol repeated, you can wait until it reveals enough meaning before deciding. This is where truth is smart appears not as a skill, but as the natural result of knowing where you stand in your inner power. Jung emphasizes that the unconscious is not against you, it is against you. When you observe without judgment or coercion, the unconscious no longer needs to create intense disruption gradually give way to subtler signals, and as signals become subtler, thinking gains the conditions to process them more accurately. Calm, in this sense, is not a goal you strive for, but a state that arises when inner conflict no longer dominates. Finally, Jung's method of inner observation does not promise immediate peace. It promises something else, gradual clarity. You do not control the unconscious, but you are no longer led by it in the moment. You do not resolve every inner conflict, but you know where your reactions are coming from. And in the most difficult situations, this simple yet profound knowing is what allows you to remain calm while making decisions that do not betray reality. At this point, stay calm is no longer about standing still in the storm, but about reading the current beneath the surface. And to think smart is no longer about speed or sharpness, but about thinking from the right inner position. Number 11. Practical story 2. The story of a woman who could not reach a conclusion. So what happens when a person no longer uses thinking to reach conclusions, but to recognize their own limits? Emily enters this story not as someone in crisis, but as a woman who appears entirely normal by social standards. She is 33, lives in a large city, has a stable job, a regular life, and a relationship of over 4 years with a partner considered suitable. No one around her sees signs of instability. Both families agree. Friends believe it is time to move forward. Even Emily herself believed this for many years. That is why her story does not begin with an event, but with a very small pause in thinking, so small that, if unnoticed, it would quickly be labeled indecision, lack of resolve, or fear of commitment. What confused Emily was not the question, should I get married or not, but the fact that she could no longer approach that question in the old way. Each time marriage was mentioned, her thinking neither opposed nor agreed. It simply stopped. Not because emotions surged, not because of anxiety or fear, but because the reasons that once made sense no longer carried on. They were not wrong, but they were insufficient. And in that gap, Emily began to realize something she had never faced before. There are moments in psychological life when thinking does not break down. It refuses to continue serving a structure that has completed its role. From a Jungian perspective, this is a characteristic moment of transformation, quiet, undramatic, yet decisive. The psyche does not push Emily into action, nor does it give her an answer. Instead, it withdraws energy from familiar patterns, rendering thinking unable to operate on her form. If Emily had forced herself to think it through, she would have entered prolonged tension. But what is striking is that she did not. Instead of chasing answers, she began to notice the moment thinking stopped. This shift is subtle. Emily did not call it a method, nor believe she was doing something right. She simply noticed that whenever the future was defined within fixed frames, marriage, stability, a socially accepted trajectory, her thinking lost momentum, not only with marriage, but with any long-term closed-ended decision. She did not react, argue with herself, or try to explain. She simply noted, here, thinking cannot go further. And that very non-intervention created a calm, unlike anything she had known. This calm was never enough. It did not make the issue disappear. But it ended in a battle between having to decide and being unable to decide. Jung believed that when consciousness stops forcing the psyche to answer in familiar ways, another order has the chance to talk. Emily did not solve that problem, she suspended defining it as a problem. And in that suspension, thinking began to shift roles from a tool of control to a tool of observation. This observation did not take place in therapy, nor through complex inner analysis. It unfolded in everyday life. Emily began to notice ordinary situations repeated around her, prearranged plans that made her hesitate, choices everyone deemed reasonable but she could not enter. No intense emotions accompanied them, no memories surfaced. Only a strange consistency in thinking's refusal to close the future in the moment. For Jung, this is precisely the indirect language of the soul, not to be explained immediately, but to be seen. Crucially, Emily did not rush to assign meaning to these findings. She did not conclude that the relationship was wrong, nor convince herself she was not ready. She understood only this: the structure that once helped her become stable, appropriate, and adaptable was no longer spacious enough to contain the person formed within. And crisis, in the Jungian sense, is the moment when this truth can no longer be avoided. Here, staying calm does not mean maintaining morality to reassure others. It is the ability not to panic when familiar thinking loses effectiveness. Emily did not force herself back into her old shape just to feel safe. She allowed the state of not knowing to exist as a legitimate part of psychological life. This calm did not make her more certain. It made her more honest with what was unfolding within. And that honesty laid the ground for a more intelligent form of thinking to emerge. Thinking smart, in Emily's case, no longer meant choosing the correct option, but recognizing when thinking was no longer neutral. Obviously, her thinking worked efficiently because it aligned with foundational assumptions she never had to question. When those assumptions no longer matched the person she was becoming, thinking did not betray her, it stopped. And only when Emily did not force it back, did critical thinking return, not to conclude, but to distinguish what belonged to old habits, and what belonged to a changing reality. Emily's story reveals something essential to the Jungian spirit. Sharp thinking does not always lead to clear action. There are phases in life when the most intelligent thinking is knowing when to step back, not allowing emptiness to be filled with familiar answers, and not letting the fear of undecidedness drive you back into constricting forms. In such difficult moments, calm is not control, and intelligence is not speed. Emily has not decided, but more important, she no longer allows old patterns to decide for her. And at that point, staying calm and thinking smart are no longer separate skills, but two expressions of the same capacity. The ability to remain with the psyche's process of transformation without betrayal or temporary conflict. And when thinking no longer reaches immediate conclusions, the cause is not always deep inner transformation. Sometimes it comes from another, quieter force, the need to continue being the right person, in the right role, with the right image, aligned with expectations others have grown accustomed to seeing. Number 12. Persona. The mask that makes thinking lose its honesty. Persona, in Carl Jung's thought, is the social mask that helps an individual adapt and function within collective life, not a form of con or falseness. The problem arises only when a person identifies with that mask and allows it to dominate thinking and rule them. The persona is that which in reality one is not, of which oneself, as well as others, think one is. In everyday life, very few roads that flow smoothly, yet always lead in the same direction, protecting the image you have grown accustomed to control. You do not think, I must preserve my image. You think, this isn't appropriate. This isn't the right time. I should behave more maturely. The language is polished, social and respectful, but the motive underneath is no longer neutral. Persona is like a well-fitted outfit you wear when you go out. The problem begins when you forget that you are wearing clothes and start believing that you are the clothes themselves. When this identification occurs, every decision must answer an implicit question: will this damage the image I am? And from that moment on, critical thinking, honest reflective thinking, begins to bend in ways that are very hard to detect. A helpful metaphor for persona is a glass mask. It is transparent, so you forget it is there. Others see you through that pane of glass, and you also see your world through it. Everything still appears clear on the surface, but just one small scratch is enough for the line of sight to reflect. You no longer see things as they are, but as they need to be seen, so the mask does not crack. And because the mask is transparent, you still believe you are looking directly at reality. In this context, stay calm is often misunderstood. Outwardly, people governed by persona often feel very composed. They speak carefully, react appropriately, rarely show confusion. But that calm does not come from being. It comes from not allowing any thought to deviate from the image we maintain. Calm becomes a social requirement, not an inner state. And it is precisely this confusion that causes thinking to gradually lose its honesty. Consider a very ordinary example. A woman working as a manager in a non-profit organization is widely regarded as always thoughtful, always considerate of her members. She is used to seeing herself as someone who avoids conflict and does not put personal needs first. In an important meeting, she realizes that a decision about to be approved will have long-term negative consequences for the project. Her reason clearly seems the issue. But at the same time, another thought arises quickly. If she speaks up in opposition, she will become difficult, too rigid, not aligned with the team's spirit. She does not think she is afraid of losing her image. She thinks she is maintaining harmony, choosing a more appropriate moment. In the end, she remains silent. The decision passes. Months later, the project encountered exactly the problem she had foreseen. Looking back, she does not feel that her logic was wrong. She only feels a vague discomfort. Why did I see it and not speak? Here, her thinking did not lack information or analytical ability. What was distorted was the starting point of thought. The question was no longer, what is right for this situation,